Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson, broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Some of you love the intro, some of you hate it, but you know what? I like it, so we'll keep it. It is August 1st, 2020. A really nice time, huh? The month of August. It's a month of rest, recovery, cleanup, and a litany of things to do. So we've certainly got a big backlog of stuff that came from the exchanges. We're working our way through that. We also got ourselves quite a bit of stuff to do on the optimization side of things. We've received numerous reports from various people about Daedalus being a little slow. That's because a lot of the Shelly code is correct, but not completely optimized yet. You have to cut somewhere when you're preparing for a release. And we said, well, it'd be better to optimize after release than before, because we can do it with the entire community instead of our QA team. So anyway, throughout the month of August, these are the types of things that are going to be cleaned up. It'll get a lot faster. Most people aren't having any issues, but some people, myself included, on one of my laptops, it's taken quite a bit of time to parse the chain and do a bunch of things. So, you know, it's just what you expect when you release new software. There's some rough edges here and there. But all things considered, it's actually quite easy to performance profile, and it's quite easy to clean up a lot of these rough edges. It's just, it takes a little bit of time and dedicated focus. And so there was a huge surge to get Shelly out. Now that it's out, we can spend the month of August doing that type of work. So expect a few updates, at least two, I suspect, in the month of August. Perhaps more, but likely around two. One in the first half of August and probably one in the closing of August that will resolve a lot of those little things and issues and should improve performance for those who are having performance issues. Other than that, my first help desk report post-launch came in, and we received a lot of the usual suspects from here and there. You know, connecting to network issues. Usually those are ISP related at this point, or firewall configurations, but most part, little stuff like that. Not a huge amount of ticket flow. A lot of the exchanges are still in maintenance mode, but they're in active communication with us, and we're kind of chipping away at it. Next week, Monday, we're going to ship a patch specifically for certain exchanges so that they can finalize their integration. So we should see a lot of the exchanges go green and turn online next week. We already saw that with Kraken and, you know, probably Binance and the rest of these guys. They're working real hard, and we're certainly working with them. And it's a great endurance test of the software, and it's a great acid test to verify that everything is looking right and performance is where it needs to be and so forth. It's a humongous transition for them. And of course, we're here 24/7 until it gets done. So most exchanges should probably go green next week, if not all. At least the largest ones. And Uroi is making some great progress. I believe they just released 3.0. And I think it works with the Shelly network, but it's Byron only. And the Shelly specific functionality and delegation should probably come soon. So next week, things are looking good. And they'll look increasingly better as we work our way through August and swallow the Shelly launch. Rewards are moving over August 3rd, just like we said. And staking will begin soon. Pools are already registered. A lot of pools have been registered. I'd noticed some grumbling from some of the stake pool operators about IO Global pools. We're testing a lot of different configurations, and you know, the best way to learn is by doing. And we've tested configurations in the past on the ITN and the Pioneer testnets. Now that we have a live network, it's actually good to see these things as well. So we're doing all kinds of things, public pools and private pools. My preferred mode of operation would be to go complete community delegation. There's going to be a bit of a profit hit if we do that. We're right now calculating what that's going to look like. But it would be nice because we wouldn't have to run our own infrastructure, and it's a nice way to support the community as a whole. But the way that we secure our ADA is very cumbersome, and as a consequence, operationally, it's a little difficult to do something like that and not have to spend quite a bit of time, especially when you're rotating pools. So we're building a lot of stuff behind the scenes, some of which will actually for the stake pool operators as well, so that we can preserve that operating environment for securing our ADA, but then also have an easy operating environment for staking and delegation and so forth. So that's something that's in the August-September timeframe, and we're working very heavily on that. I've also made a great priority for Multi-Sig. We support Multi-Sig in the node, and all that's there. That actually came in with the Shelly hard fork, but that capability isn't yet exposed to the wallet backend and to Daedalus. And we also are going to need a routing server for Multi-Sig. So we're probably going to give a fixed cost contract to ATIX to do a routing server, and we'll work our way through the stack and put something in Daedalus and the wallet backend and so forth. So that's another one of those August, September timeframes so that we can pull that out. And then eventually, after the network team is done with peer-to-peer, we'll take a look at the design of that multi-sig routing server and pull it entirely into the network design. So you can do completely decentralized peer-to-peer multi-sig without having to use a server to route people together. But we'll try to innovate a little bit too. Like when you're building your key holders, you can use PGP or DIDs or something like that as a standard to actually authenticate each other above and beyond email addresses or things like that, which is commonly used with solutions like BitPay. But that's coming, and that's going to be a lot of fun. My personal preference will be to have hardware multi-sig, so you have MFN, Ledger, or Trezor devices, and then you can delegate to that. Another thing that has come up is the concept of one-to-many delegation. So right now, if you want to delegate, it's atomic delegation. So a wallet delegates the complete amount to one pool. If you want to split that up, you actually have to create separate wallets, and that's a manual process. There are some reasons why that was done, and they're pretty good reasons, but it would be nice to see if we can do a one-to-many delegation so you can fractionally delegate to many pools. So we're going to be exploring all of that in August and September, and that would really improve the operating model for a lot of people because they'd have less keywords to deal with and so forth. But other than that, it's just exactly what you expect when you do a major upgrade. There's this huge thing that comes. As soon as the huge thing comes, there's a patch or two, like a week or two after it comes, but cleans up the obvious stuff. And then you have this long tail of improvement. And then a group of people focus on making everything better. So improving the user experience, more features and functionality, blah, blah, blah. There's just a litany of things that have to be done. And we have people who wake up every day full time, whose day job is to do nothing but worry about that. And the Addressia team is worried about that. And this is what they do. So there's people who will make sure that that happens. I'm still very keen to have access control, account recovery, and spending passwords be enforced through a security key. So I would love to see U2FA devices, so FIDO compliant devices like YubiKeys, for example, in the Daedalus security model. So you can have a login and for Daedalus, and instead of having a username and password, you use a security key to be able to open the app and get past that screen, and then also use it as a second factor authentication for spending password. So you can have a spending password and a YubiKey to be able to spend funds, or just a YubiKey to spend funds, for example. So you didn't have to remember passwords, for example, if you want to use that particular security model. And then account restoration is also something we're looking at. Now, we're also going to start something involving secure QR codes. And basically what that is that with Voltaire, the Catalyst app that we have, we don't want people to have to enter a wallet recovery phrase into that to be able to vote. It would be nice if you could generate a secure QR code that has whatever credentials necessary to vote, and they're shielded. So you actually have to enter a spending password to decrypt them, but they're shielded in the QR code itself. So your process of activating your voting interface will be as simple as generating a QR code, scanning it with your phone, and then entering your spending password when you want to vote. And you don't actually have to enter your wallet recovery keys. So we've been looking into that. It's also a really good way of creating a mobile wallet experience. Like, for example, if we can make this a standard, then Uroi mobile, if you wanted to move from Daedalus and create a Uroi mobile wallet, you could just simply scan the QR code, and then it would restore the wallet on Uroi, for example. So we've been looking at this type of stuff, and Darko's working on it. It's just the Daedalus team is a bit overwhelmed with a lot of the cleanup, and they will be for the next 2 to 4 weeks. But we're going to add some more resources to that team, and we're adding a dedicated BA to that team so that we can kind of improve their efficiency. And exiting August, we should see a big acceleration of these things and augmenting existing experiences we're planning. For example, we're planning the Hardware Wallet Center We have to kind of wait for a firmware update, and that firmware update for Shelly is going to include the unique hardware ID, so you can support multiple hardware wallets and Daedalus, little things like that. But that's going to come in August, and it'll be very nice for everybody. So we're catching up. We're speeding up. Shelly was hell to get out, no doubt. But we now are in a really good place in terms of infrastructure. It's easy to work with the code. It's easy to test the code. It's easy to do performance profiling with the code. It's going to be easy to do a litany of things that basically allow us to upgrade and improve the product very rapidly. Furthermore, new feature development can be done now in parallel because of the architecture. We have this polyolithic architecture is finally starting to pay off. And we're now in a position where we can really evolve things to a point where it's just beautiful and usable. So a little bit more patience is required. I'd say most, if not everybody's going to be completely happy in about 4 to 6 weeks, from exchanges to general users to people having performance issues and so forth. So as we exit August and enter September, things will look pretty good. Other than that, the product is functional. People can register pools. Well over 500 have been registered. You can stake to pools, delegate to pools, and all those features are working. And we're marching towards stake pool operators making blocks. In about the middle part of this month, the D parameter is going to start decrementing. And that means that we're actually going to see, for the first time in the project's history, Ouroboros Prios be used to make blocks by independent stake pool operators in the community. So that's a huge accomplishment. And I suspect that K and D are both going to grow and decrease at great rates respectively. So we'll see a lot more pools than we even have. And I suspect that D will reach 0 probably just in a few months. But it's going to, every epoch, have a steady rate of decline. And when it hits 0, we're fully decentralized. And right into the interface of Daedalus, you can actually see the progress bar towards that end. Towards the back half of August, the network team is going to start turning on the peer-to-peer governor. And that's going to start turning on peer-to-peer for the entire network. So that was kind of like the last mile of the network stack. It's a completely new way of doing networking. Most people just use secure Kademlia or something like that. They kind of copy ideas that Bitcoin and Ethereum developed 5 and 10 years ago, respectively. We built from the ground up a completely new way of doing networking. So all that documentation and a lot of discussion about that's going to come out in August. And the peer-to-peer will start being profiled and parameterized and rolled out gradually. And it's not going to take too long, probably about 6 to 8 weeks once that process begins. And then the network will reach full resilience at that point. So that's pretty awesome too. So you'll see D decrement, peer-to-peer turn on, and then we're at full decentralization before the end of the year, hopefully before Thanksgiving. So that's just a great thing. Towards the end of August, when we do the product update, we'll have some things to say about Gogan. Gogan really has 2 big releases followed by a long tail of things to do. One part is the native asset component. So that's basically going from a single asset ledger to a multi-asset ledger. And then the other part is Plutus Foundations, which is basically the smart contracting language and so forth. In order of release, the native assets is the first part. And there's an open question of, could we combine both of these to one giant release, or would it make more sense to do 2 hard fork events, 2 HFC events to deploy that? So in August, we'll talk about that in much more detail. And it really has to do with development, productivity, and what we learn as we're cleaning things up, reducing technical debt, and how we see acceleration occurring. The good news is when you work with low technical debt, high quality, very modular code, it's quite easy to add in a lot of things or refactor, or just like as you think, say, maybe we should do it this way. And the formal specs for these things are mostly done. So it's more of a matter of just pulling them into the product. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can move very quickly in integrating both of these events into Cardano. But one thing at a time. We have to kind of digest Shelly. That's a huge endeavor. And as you've seen with exchanges upgrading and all this other stuff happening, there's a lot to do. The Adrestia team also needs to do a lot of work to move from a single asset to a multi-asset wallet backend, because we want to have an equivalent listing experience. So if you issue an asset on Cardano, we would like to make it very simple for an exchange to list that asset if desired, like literally a flag. So if they've already integrated ADA, to integrate ADA plus your coin, if your coin is issued on the platform, it should be very simple to do that. And we'd like that to extend throughout all services in the stack. So for example, Daedalus, to be able to display it, we need to make sure that that's present. Ledger, et cetera, we need to make that a fairly straightforward and easy process. So there's a little bit of work, but we've already kind of pre-planned that architecture, and the way that we've designed things makes it easier than most, but it still is a little bit of work, and we'll parallelize it as much as we can. We've been really effectively utilizing vacuum labs on the hardware side and ATIX on the infrastructure side. Like, for example, ATIX did a fixed cost contract for Rosetta support with Adrestia. And there's a litany of other little things like that that we think we can bring them in, like the Multi-Sig coordination server and so forth. So we'll do that to make sure that we can accelerate progress and we can work in parallel to get a lot of that constellation of infrastructure that's required to have a very refined, mature product and market done. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with things. It's a good position to be in. You know, we have good momentum. Everything is working the way we intended. We're able to digest things properly. The quant stamp audit is going on, and they're having a great time with it. And we're learning a lot from them, and they're learning a lot from us. And we should be able to publish that security audit report in September with all the remediations suggested. And the product is very pristine. It's hard to build something in Haskell. But once you've done it, it gets easier every day, and you start getting into a flow. And the worst days are behind us. And now that that flow is there, we can only ever speed up, and we can only ever parallelize and do more and more and more. We're also going to be talking a lot about how to keep developer adoption strong and create a lot of use and utility. You know, we have some internal strategies. We're not quite ready to make those public, but we certainly will when the time is right. And we're, of course, working with a lot of partners behind the scenes on things. And so I think a Gogan launch will be quite strong, all things considered. But, you know, still in the Shelly era, a lot to do. I'm pretty proud of the fact that we're here. And, of course, our critics are silent. I noticed that no one's been talking much except for, oh, it's very easy to do proof of stake. And, you know, everybody else has proof of stake. So you guys are just catching up with people. But, you know, they don't understand what they're talking about. And they know they're obviously wrong. When people took very hard positions, such as Shelly will never ship, we'll bet you $1,000. Actually, one Bitcoin, I think one person bet me, one Bitcoin that Shelly won't ship in 2020, maybe 2023 is what they bet. I don't think I'm ever going to get that Bitcoin. But hey, it is what it is. What can you do? You know, this is who these people are. They're vicious, hostile critics. In your worst days and your best days, they're nowhere to be found. We just ignore them at this point. And to that point, recently there was an issue in the Haskell community where a fairly prominent member of the Haskell community wrote basically slander, calling our entire industry an industry of criminals. In a private email, he mentioned that the only reason cryptocurrencies have any value is because organized crime in Asia are running all the exchanges. Obviously, this person is deeply mistaken. Coinbase doesn't seem to be in Asia, actually in California, a highly regulated entity, trading institutional money from Wall Street, but okay. Obviously, this person is deeply mistaken about a great many things, but his attempt was to create a rift in the Haskell community and somehow divorce the community or shame the certain members of the community into stop working on cryptocurrency projects, or call them Judases or something for taking dirty money. It almost reminds me of Grothendieck, the famous mathematician who left the entire field of mathematics after reaching the apex of it because he had issues with how math was being funded by governments. And of course, he lived alone for 50 years as a hermit until he died alone. So I guess if this man wants to go down that route, well, more than welcome. But it is what it is, and it's predictable. You know, certain people get really pissed off when you try to change things or don't understand things and don't want to give you the benefit of the doubt. But the point of this is that we as a community need to be better in reacting to criticism. And it starts at the top. I need to be better into reacting to criticism. And there is no excuse to personally attack people and no excuse to call people ignorant or bad human beings because they happen to disagree with us. Now, if people are slandering us and saying that we're criminals or that we are somehow morally compromised to the extent we should be blacklisted from society, of course we should get aggressive in that case with our rebuttals, but we should never use personal insults or diminish people. And I noticed that on the Haskell Reddit and on Twitter and other places, some overly enthusiastic members of our community were saying things that were perhaps a bit too aggressive or demeaning. And I understand that you're passionate about the project, but that's not necessary. And it makes us look bad as a community if that is the response that we have to criticism. The reality is that we can rebut things with well-reasoned arguments, good rhetoric, and facts. And the facts are on our side. Cryptocurrencies don't exist because somebody woke up and said, let's just reinvent the wheel. They are and forever will be a product of frustration of a lack of accountability, a frustration of corruption, and a frustration of blatant unfairness. That's just a fact. In fact, the very beginning of Bitcoin, embedded in the very first block of the system, was a harsh rebuke of the bailout culture of 2008. It's a response of the Great Recession there. So we can't, as an industry, pretend like such things are not the case. They are. We've always been contrarian. We've always been anti-state issued money, anti-government control, and we've always been a bit more libertarian. Now, our critics label this as utopianism or crypto anarchy or right-wing extremism, but the reality is many governments are failing in their basic utility and nature. Okay, a government's job is to protect its people and to provide a fair environment for people to live their lives and enjoy their freedoms and liberties. It's, in essence, a public trust. I believe very firmly in the John Locke version of things, and we as the beneficiaries of that trust inherit a better society than the one that we found as a consequence of its existence. Governments, by and large, have been failing in the financial markets and in the freedom markets. And things like social credit, civil asset forfeiture, the hyper-centralization of wealth and power, things like us being in the worst recession since the Great Depression and the US GDP declining 30%, yet our billionaire class makes an additional $600 billion off the backs of this horrible event. And the government's response is to print more money and hand the majority of that money to the very people who don't need it. At what point do you start questioning the legitimacy of the markets? At what point do you start questioning the legitimacy of the global regulatory structure or the people who are governing things? And the solution isn't just simply to fire them in an election, because we've done that. In the United States, we replaced the Bushes with the Obamas with the Trumps. These are all radically different people, yet Wall Street behaves exactly the same way, despite the fact that management has changed. We've seen huge political changes from left wing to right wing, and nothing is different. My belief, and the belief of people in our industry, has always been the only way to change things is through incentives and economics and markets that are fair, as opposed to asking for permission to change things at a ballot box or electing the demagogue of the week. Now, people can disagree with us, but the reality is we've devoted our lives, our money, and our day-to-day efforts towards this end. And while they can disagree, to call us criminals or say our entire industry is illegitimate because we choose a different philosophy and we want to live a different way and we'd like to be treated differently than how we've been treated, is insanity. It's demeaning, it's disgusting, and it's one of the most insulting things a person can do. I am not a criminal for endorsing an economic system that maximizes people's personal freedom and liberty. I am not a criminal for endorsing an economic system that thinks people are smart enough to be able to vote with their dollars and their feet and enter economic systems that have different regulatory structures. We are not an unregulated industry. In fact, we are the most regulated industry in the entire world. Why? Because our regulations start from mathematics and first principles. Whether I wake up or Adam Back wakes up or Greg Maxwell or someone else wakes up and says, we just want to change the monetary policy of Bitcoin. No matter how prominent and powerful we are, can't be done. And it's the same for Cardano. This requires an overwhelming majority of the users of the system, and the more decentralized the system becomes, the stronger the social contract of the system is. And it takes a lot of effort to actually change that. So there is no concept of an unelected group of people in shadowy rooms making arbitrary decisions to print trillions of dollars out of thin air and give it to their political friends. No, the values are what they are, and the rules are fair. If you play a game of chess during World War II in the ghettos of Poland, you play a game of chess in a gulag in Russia, you play a game of chess in the United States in Central Park. The rules are the same. Doesn't matter about the particular of the players or what's going on. Doesn't care about if you're happy or sad, if you're in a good position or a bad position. The rules are the same. And our financial systems should work that way as well. The rules should always be the same. And that way, at least we have some belief that things are predictable. Our problem has been that the rules are not the same. And they haven't been, perhaps ever, in the history of the financial industry. Different people get different rules. JP Morgan got to play by different rules than the farmers. And the organization that still holds his name gets to play by different rules than my company does. That's not fair. And I can't go elect a president or a congressman or a senator to change that. We've tried it. The only way we can make it fair is to pull this industry into protocols. The internet behaves predictably the same, regardless if you live in a totalitarian regime like North Korea or the United States, because they're using the same protocols. And they have to do all these kinds of bizarre kabuki things, like in China with the Great Firewall, to try to control and constrain that. In some cases, they're successful. Often they're not. I would like to live in a world where my money, my property, my identity, my ability to express myself behaves the same regardless of who I happen to be, where I happen to live, or who I was born to, or how rich I am. To say that this is a scam and that there's no merit or value to what we do as a system is just insanity. Another misconception that I've seen is this concept of a blockchain is just a database. There's no value to that. This is another example of where very smart people in one domain think that there's this transitivity to wisdom and intelligence. The same people who believe that don't seem to understand how modern business works in any respect. If you are Ford or GM or SpaceX or any modern company that has to work with other companies to achieve something, like launching a rocket or shipping a car, you have to work with dozens of different companies you don't control. And every single time you do that, friction occurs because those companies are regulated differently. They have different management. They have different business processes, different levels of professionalism. And you have to write complex contracts and other arrangements to try to keep the federation together. And almost always you have a situation where one or more of those actors are a bit delinquent on things. Even the best of companies like Apple run into this on a daily basis. And the global cost of this commercial friction that occurs is in the hundreds of billions of dollars throughout the world. The whole reason firms like Ernst & Young and PwC and McKinsey and all these other firms exist, in part, is to try to resolve this very problem. That's not a database problem. It's a commercial friction problem. The point of blockchain technology has always been that you get a group of actors who don't fully trust each other to create a common set of rules amongst each other so that they can work together. And if they follow those rules, there's a cooperative equilibria and that commercial friction goes down. That's not a scam. That's just life. Walmart has to live this way. When they get their food suppliers and they sell $40 billion worth of groceries every single year. Amazon has to live this way when they have to syndicate and work with a massive logistics arm to be able to get you a package same day or in a single day. Every major company that has to deliver something to you that requires a third party to help them in that process in some way has to live with that commercial friction. And on the permission side, and perhaps even the permissionless side, The goal is the reduction of commercial friction. That's a worthwhile endeavor, and that's why this technology exists. Now, on the permissionless side, we are talking about alternative markets for association, commerce, and expression. And there, we're talking about saying perhaps the government should not be the root of trust for your identity. Perhaps the government should not be the root of trust for the central bank function. Perhaps the government should not be the regulator of last resort or primary regulator of the marketplaces. And there are different ways of structuring these marketplaces. Perhaps when we talk about international trade and settlement, we should have a transnational system instead of a local system to accommodate that because of variations in the rule of law. This is especially important when we talk about the developing world, where 3 billion people are excluded from the world economy. Now, why do these systems require tokens? Because you have to incentivize people to maintain them. Otherwise, you have a tragedy of the commons situation, and you have a patron situation where a small group of actors behind the scenes can take over the system and run it in a shadowy way and basically insert all kinds of kabuki and censorship. The token economy is what allows you to go from a single computer mining Bitcoin in January 3rd of 2009 to mammoth warehouses of servers competing with each other in 2020. And proof of stake is just merely an evolution of that particular system. And apparently this is the greater fool phenomena, even though it provides real utility. For example, all my employees in Ukraine desire to be paid in cryptocurrencies, not local systems that don't use the local banks. So for them, their entire livelihood is based on this system. And that is the case for many thousands of people. How is that the greater fool when real utility is being provided to them? And then we ask ourselves, would you like to get a loan? Very soon competing products will exist in the DeFi space that are significantly better than local loans for hundreds of millions to billions of people. Already with the innovation in stablecoins, we've seen enormous amounts of iterations occurring to a point that within a few years, we should have transnational stable assets that can be used for insurance and lending products that do not require faith in a particular banking institution or jurisdiction. All of this innovation was again occurring first from the principles of math-based regulation, the highest form of regulation. And if you want to install local regulation, it can and is being done. And it's being done in ways that can automate it and make compliance costs 1 to 2 orders of magnitude lower than the compliance costs that the most optimized organizations like Chase pay on a regular basis. Again, the author of that article seemed to think that there is no utility to this, and it's all just one gigantic Ponzi scheme, because he has no clue what he's talking about. He has no knowledge of the actual real financial system. And he's just parroting things, the same things that people who bred horses were saying about cars when they first came out, because they couldn't understand the model and where the model goes. And that's okay. Not everybody gets the revolution. I remember my grandparents, when the internet first came out, they didn't get it, they didn't understand it, they didn't think it had any value, and they were often going to criticize it. It didn't delegitimize the existence of the internet. It just meant that it would take them a little bit longer to finally get why we do what we do. But that is why we do what we do. On the business side, the reduction of commercial friction, and on the permissionless side of things, the maximization of liberty and freedom for people, give people economic identity and alternative systems, because the systems they have are failing them in some way or another, either because they live in jurisdictions of capital controls and lack of rule of law, or because the government has done things in a way that are just blatantly unfair to the least amongst us. And they want an alternative that's more fair for them. It's quite that simple. We have tokens because those represent incentives. Those represent ownership in these systems, and they give people basically an alternative way of managing it without centralized control. And they flow from one user to another user. The same group of people aren't there year after year. There's different people. And that token economy is quite effective. We've seen it born an entire industry worth $500 billion in under 10 years. We've never seen that before in human history. Yes, people abuse it, and there are problems. I personally, in 2017, said ICO mania was counterproductive. That apparently was omitted from the author's article. And yes, many of the ICOs will produce nothing. But how is it fair to hold that standard when 90% of venture-backed investments fail amongst the best people in the industry? The 10% that do succeed create the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples and the Intels and the Microsofts of the world. And similarly, the small set of funded ventures that do succeed have created the Ethereums and the Cardanos and the others, which will push the entire world forward and help us deliver universal economic identity. Already, we have seen new kinds of jobs materialize in these platforms. And these platforms have great promise to provide funding that is free from patronage and free from ulterior motives for open source project development. Our own company has put in millions of dollars into the betterment of Haskell. Again, the author omitted all of that from his article. Apparently, it's blood money from his perspective. Tell me, how will we ever get to a point where open source infrastructure can be made in a more pure way and people can work every single day and not have to worry about who to sell to, so that they can just create things that are useful and other people can use those things? Isn't that a better society to live in? This is a model that can get us there. It has moral hazards that need to be corrected, but we are, as an industry, correcting them. Year by year, it's getting better. To say that we've made no progress since 2013, since 2012, when these things first started happening, is blind, it's myopic, and just pathetic. And it's diminishing and demeaning to all the people who wake up every day trying to create something great. But it is what it is. What can you do? So, to our community, be better. We don't need to demean people or criticize people or be mean to them. Just ignore them, and myself included. I'll do better myself. To the world, we're going to go change you. It's going to be a lot of fun. And to the people that we're working with, we love working with you. All right. Anyway, let's get to your questions. Can you talk about Ben Goritzel and AGI? I have talked to the Move project over at Cardano. We are definitely talking to them, and Ben's a big fan of Cardano, and we're having a lot of fun with those discussions. We should be able to announce something about some form of collaboration soon, but we're not quite where we need to be yet. There's still a lot of back and forth between Jerry and Ben and so forth. But I'll update you guys soon. My apologies, my question may sound naive, but if a country needs a stimulus such as one of the EU, how is the blockchain going to help in that matter? Well, actually, it's a humongous efficiency game. So let's say that you have a blockchain-based identity. You also, because of the way these systems work, have a payment and settlement system. So if you're able to identify all the people in a society through some decentralized means, and they're able to prove who they are, and those are also wallets that can hold funds, then what you can do for a stimulus program is say, register a wallet through a transaction. And once you've done that, we'll send your stimulus money to it. And in a click of a button, you've just distributed stimulus to N people. So as many people as you want in that society. You can also use it for voting as well. So you can use that for voting registration. So the whole mail-in ballot and voter fraud issue that we're running into, and the how the hell do we distribute $6 trillion of checks and make sure that people get it instantly, and instead of waiting several days or weeks or months, is completely resolved by having a system like this. And you get proof of payment. You can see the public ledger that those payments have gone out. People know it's there. It's instantly accessible to them, and they can do whatever they want to do with it. And you can even create special accounts that have restrictions on how people can spend or do based upon the policy that the government has. For example, the government wants to institute universal basic income, but say that UBI can only be spent for a collection of goods. You can create a special address structure with special terms and conditions and rules and pay UBI to that, and only approved merchants and vendors can receive funds from those accounts. So you could eliminate a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse behind food stamps and other social welfare programs, and your cost of delivery is extremely low. You just onboard people into the system once, and then they can use that same system to vote, hold property, to receive payments, and to spend from. Easy peasy. Suggestion, can you change the name of the Uroi wallet? Yeah, a lot of people seem to conflate Uroi and Emergo with IOHK. We are not Emergo, and we are not Uroi. It is a separate legal entity. I hold no equity in it, have no control over it, and Uroi is their product. So, I love the product. I think it's a great product, and they're a great company, but we're different companies, so I can't answer Uroi-related questions other than to give my opinion on perhaps what we should have. My sound is clicking. Is my sound still clicking for you guys? You guys hearing that? Okay. Yeah, I'm on a fiber optic internet connection. This is a $200 microphone. It's $7,000 computer, 256 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, AMD Threadripper processor, multi-terabyte storage, M.2. Got an RTX card in this. It's pretty nice. Yeah, I see that one a lot. I said there's been a lot of FUD recently around Cardano's early days and some shady Japanese websites and Cardano being a gaming coin. Can you please comment on this, clear the FUD? I've already commented on it multiple times. The only community that seems to want to push this narrative is the Tezos community. Again, I think it's because they just want to compete with us and they think maybe by lying, that's okay. The narrative is always the same. We started as a scam, shady gamble coin that was exclusively marketed to old, vulnerable people. And then when we read the Tezos white paper, we woke up and said, wow, we can just copy everything that they do and copy them and then try to go legit. That's the narrative that they push. And their evidence for this is there's some websites in Japanese that say Cardano is a gaming coin, which we didn't create or any of the core project members created or the foundation has anything to do with. Early in the project history, there were some people that were very enthusiastic about using games to spread adoption. And as we saw with things like CryptoKitties, for example, that was quite successful in the early days of Ethereum to create adoption. But that by no means was the core point of the project. The project was always supposed to be a financial operating system. The whole point of the project was to build a platform that could do the things that something like Ethereum could do, but be what we termed to be a third generation cryptocurrency, which meant that we could scale. So as we gained users, we stayed at the same performance level or increased, that we were interoperable, we could talk to many systems, and we were sustainable, meaning the system always had funds and governance mechanisms to decide where to go and how to pay for things. This was the core of the project from the very beginning. Now, yeah, Tezos white paper came out, 2015 or something like that. Great for them. I'd been talking about these things since I did my TED Talk publicly in 2014. And I was the CEO of Ethereum, and this was the original plan that I had when I was the CEO of Ethereum back in 2013. So what? I left Ethereum, decided to go and defraud a bunch of old Japanese people, which, by the way, there were none. It's like the average age of an ADA purchaser, I think, was around 30 or something like that. But okay, let's just lie. They just love lying. It's their whole thing in life. Then somehow along the way, we just decided to go copy some project that a guy working at JP Morgan, whose IP probably belongs to JP Morgan. And that's why there's a pseudonym on the paper, by the way. Let's just go copy that whole idea. By the way, there was nothing material meaningful in Tezos white paper about how to actually implement a governance system. There was nothing material meaningful in Tezos white paper about what programming language or programming model to use. So there was no smart contract model. There was nothing material meaningful in the Tezos white paper about the consensus model. Arthur had to figure all that out for himself. And the Tezos community doesn't seem to be able to admit that there is no overlap in our designs and protocols with their designs and protocols. Zero. We use a completely different accounting model. We use extended UTXO. They use like more of an Ethereum style account. We use completely different consensus protocols that are based on years of academic peer-reviewed research. Theirs are not. We use completely different programming languages. Michelson is nowhere near what Plutus looks like or Marlowe looks like, for example. It's a completely different model in that respect. There are completely different network stacks. Their network stack looks a lot more like what the Ethereum network stack looks like. Ours was based on concepts from the Arena world. So there's no protocol level similarities. There's completely different approaches on how to achieve scalability, interoperability, and sustainability. Our governance system is being built in the Voltaire framework. All of that was based on research from Lancaster and the European Union, where the European Union paid us money to look into these things. And you can see how we're setting up our voting system, and we're starting with a treasury-oriented approach as opposed to a protocol update-oriented approach as the starting point to build up governance. And we're just getting started there. And again, there's no overlap in that design with their design. So we have completely different designs. Our designs are very complex, and they're the result of 5 years of research and development. There's nothing copied from their ecosystem. And according to them, we're just a complete carbon copy, and we started as a shady gamble coin. How can we inspire the people we did and operate in the markets we do and do the things we do if all we ever wanted to do was defraud people? Second, the time to have done it was 2017 when ADA was over $1. So what? We just decided, no, we'll just ride the whole wave down, be good actors all the way until the tail. One day we'll screw everybody. It's just insanity, and it's laughable, but they believe it. They really do. It's like in their DNA, in their bones. It's like a conspiracy theory at this particular point. But if that's the kind of community they want to have and the kind of rhetoric that they want to foster, okay. And I keep saying it would be nice for the Tezos Foundation to issue a statement and say, oh, well, but the Tezos Foundation doesn't run everything. But don't they have $600 million? And don't you brag all the time about how they're the custodians who will deploy that capital to get Tezos where it needs to go? Aren't they kind of the closest thing of an official voice that you have in your community? I understand you're decentralized, great. But the reason why people invest in you and build on you is because there is a custodian who has sufficient funds. The reason you did an ICO is to have a custodian with sufficient funds. So if you have that, why can't they at least have the courage to say to their community, Cardano is not a gamble coin. We disagree with them on things. And sure, maybe Charles is an asshole from time to time. That's fair. But they're a legitimate project. Let's stop the pettiness and let's see where we can find common ground and work together. But they won't do that. Absolutely won't do that. Because they know there's benefit in having their community spread this particular narrative and attack us in every possible way in the shadows. It's pettiness, and it's pathetic. It doesn't occupy any thought in our competitive mind space or where we sit as a project. I wake up every day, I could not care less about them. It's their thing, and they can do whatever they want to do, and they can build whatever they want to build. We're not even competing for the same customer bases, at least on the IO global side. On our side, we wake up every day, we say economic identity. So we're in Ethiopia. They're not there, and they have no desire to be in that marketplace. We've never once run into a single person from the Tezos community in that area trying to build a project on Tezos. Maybe there are, but we've never seen them. So why should we care about their project and their success? The only thing that dismays me is I keep seeing the narrative being pushed time again, time again, time again, time again, time again. And I say, guys, come on. This is insanity. Even the EOS people have given up a bit, and we've reached kind of an uneasy peace. I don't really say much about EOS anymore. They don't really say much about us. It's like, you guys be you, we'll be us, we'll do different stuff. Okay. Even the Ethereum people have reached peace at this point. Occasionally they attack me as a person, but they tend to leave Cardano alone, and we tend not to do much. We still write papers about their stuff. Like just the other day, Dionysus created a very efficient gas verifier for sidechain transactions to Bitcoin in Ethereum. And there's beautiful paper. So there's still research going on in that particular space, and we understand the EVM very well. So this particular community, though, it's just very insular in that respect. Okay, it's their detriment. Absolutely their detriment. If they can't see 5 feet in front of them and realize the things that we've done are legitimate and are real, and unfortunately, this is the case, and it badly damages companies. Apple ran into this exact problem with Microsoft in the 90s, and the genius of Steve Jobs was to end that in a very pronounced way. So in the 90s, Microsoft was the arch enemy, the evil empire, and Apple had to get vengeance and somehow reclaim its throne from evil Microsoft. And then in 1997, when Steve Jobs took over Apple, he realized that the company desperately needed a bailout. So the first company he went to do that was Microsoft. They bought hundreds of millions of dollars of Apple stock, and it provided Apple the financial resources it needed to get to the iMac, which in turn allowed them to get to the iPod, which in turn allowed them to get to the iPhone, become the great company they are today. And Steve was able to change the narrative and say to the Apple community, Microsoft is not the enemy anymore. We need to move on. We do different things. We think about things differently. We'll compete at times, and other times we can collaborate, be friends. And one of the most profound things you can watch is go to YouTube and Google Steve Jobs 1997 Microsoft or something like that. Enter it into the YouTube search bar, and you could actually watch the presentation where Steve Jobs buried the hatchet and ended the patent disputes and started a partnership with Microsoft. And it was mutually beneficial. At the time, Microsoft was dealing with heavy antitrust lawsuits, and they didn't want Apple to go out of business because they basically would have become 100% of the market, been problematic for them. So they kind of needed somebody to be floating around that could compete with them as a show. And it turned out to be one of the best investments Microsoft ever made, buying that Apple stock in 1997. So similarly, great leadership allows communities to pivot and change their perspective about other projects and people, and allows you then to achieve your own goals. And we could accomplish as an ecosystem much more together than we can apart. And you have to let personalities go away and be a bigger person. And from our part, we're happy to work with anybody from the Tezos ecosystem. I think there's a lot of good actors there and a lot of good ideas there and a lot of mutual things that can be accomplished. It's their decision whether they want to keep pushing the narrative that we're a casino coin built to defraud the elderly until we counterfeited their ideas. QEditus. That's an interesting project. So QEditus is something that a pseudonym named Bill White, probably a computational logician or some form of mathematician with a love of logic, wrote years ago. And Bill and I are good friends. We talked a lot over email, and he sent me the white paper, and we talked a lot about realizing the project. But basically what QEditus is it's a marketplace for deduction. So the way that mathematics in particular is constructed is in a very analog paper-based way with handwritten proofs or typed up proofs that machines don't understand. So we as human beings can use our fleshy brains to read proofs on paper, and then we kind of make a judgment, does that proof make sense? And there's varying levels of rigor based upon the field of math and the expertise of the reader. The problem is that mathematics has been around for so long, and there's so much that's been done, and there's so much specialization that if you were to put all mathematics into a tree, you kind of have like a trunk that comes up. So you have your foundations and your set theory and your logic and these things, and that's kind of like the trunk that it lives in. And then you have all these branches that come out, like number theory and analysis and topology and algebra, and then all these little sub branches that come out that are specific fields of mathematics. It's getting very difficult for a combinatorist to be able to read a topologist paper or a number theorist paper or something like that, even though they have that common core. And the problem is the papers are getting too abstract, and there's not enough domain experts around to actually properly referee them. So either have a huge latency in the review of math, or you have an uncertainty if math is moving in the right direction or not. So you see this with things like Sonichi's ABC conjecture proof. There are just not enough people floating around that can read and understand it to a point where the community can even have an opinion on whether the proof is right or wrong. Now, some of this is Sonichi's problem because he's not particularly friendly to helping the verification effort along like Andrew Wiles was with Fermat's last theorem. But the point is, we should never be in that situation. You should have a situation where you can self-validate as much as possible using a machine that the proofs you write are correct. So the point of the Q-Adidas manifesto and the extension about the Q-Adidas project that Bill White started was to see if you could create some sort of blockchain that could host mathematical proofs of deduction, and incentivize their creation and validation. So suddenly mathematicians could work full time instead of for a university, for a blockchain, and write mathematical proofs all day in ways that machines can understand. And they can be self-referential. So that tree of mathematics can become transitive and machine understandable. Okay, so when you write your proof for your particular branch or your leaf coming off the branch, then you can connect that to a whole series of prior results, and then you can focus specifically on the things that you're worried about. The reason this hasn't been done is that it requires a lot of specialized skills. The tools aren't quite where they need to be. And to actually express the tree of mathematics and in a way that machines can understand is like thousands of man-years of effort. It would be the single largest endeavor in the history of mathematics and the second great reformalization of mathematics after the Hilbert agenda in the late 19th century, early 20th century. So Q-Adidas is kind of an attempt to say, perhaps we can turn this into a crowdsourced thing. And if we add the right incentives, the same things that you can go from a single computer mining to thousands of miners and big data centers, you could go from a single person proving things to tens of thousands of mathematicians around the world proving things. And within a generation, we'd be able to re-express all of math on more solid foundations. Now, people have been thinking about this for a long time. Martin Loff, for example, in the 1970s, it led to the creation of something called homotopy type theory. And there are a lot of really good ideas on how to approach this. Now, I'm personally quite keen to do something in this field, and I think it'd be really cool to build Q-Adidas as a project on top of Cardano and issue a token, a native asset that would represent that marketplace for deduction, and then build a lot of off-chain infrastructure, hopefully that can be run by users that would facilitate this. So it's something we're going to build a prototype team around in 2021 and start exploring if it's possible and we can get the right incentives and economic model, and then we can build lots of partners. The other thing is I'm really keen to build better formal tools than Coq or Agda or Lean to actually prove things. And it would be really cool to bring those tools into the browser. So it would be nice to take a framework as robust as Sage or another computer algebra system and pull that into a browser extension that's very easy to install and configure, and a lot of beautiful built-in tutorials, and make it very student-friendly. And then we can integrate this as part of the pedagogy of modern-day mathematics. The other thing that I'm very passionate about are open-source textbooks. And what I'd love to see is if this system worked with a treasury system, the same tokens that could be used to incentivize a marketplace for deduction could also be used to incentivize people to write Creative Commons licensed mathematical textbooks. Math tends not to change too much at the trunk and branch level. It changes at the leaves. So everything you'd need, undergraduate and graduate, to get through could be rewritten in a very collaborative, crowdsourced way, modernized for the 21st century, and then distributed along with that framework. So it'd be cool to have a great CAS in the browser, an open source textbook project, and a marketplace for deduction, and rewrite the foundations of math on something like homotopy type theory instead of ZFC set theory. It's a big passion of mine, and probably not a big market winner. You never know, though. There probably could be some way to monetize it. We'll think about it. But it's more something that I think would really help the mathematical community as a whole. Okay, this is a common misconception. Is the CF very selective when it comes to exchanges, or exchanges the ones that control the listing of Veda? No one can stop somebody from creating a marketplace for a cryptocurrency. If it's a real cryptocurrency, at any time, they can just install a full node and then tell people this is a marketplace to trade it, and send your ADA here and you can trade it for other assets and wada wada. So that can't be stopped. Now, whether that experience is easy, straightforward, fun, has enterprise level support behind it and so forth, obviously that's where organizations like the CF come into play, and they help support the community of professional regulated exchanges get where they need to go. but there are no barriers to exchanges. Anybody can do that if an exchange wants to do that. And what we've done with Addressdia is we try to create a really beautiful framework to make it very easy for exchanges to work with Cardano on both the REST API and GraphQL level. Both those things are functioning, and the proof is in the pudding. If they can easily upgrade, and next week we see most of the exchanges come online, or the week after, then we've accomplished that mission. If it's really hard for them to upgrade, well, obviously we need to do a little bit more work to get there. Charles, could Voltaire be launched next year? Well, Voltaire is already launching this year, but the way Voltaire is structured is every 6 to 8 weeks, there's an experiment, and the experiments build up more capabilities in terms of use and utility, accessibility, user experience, and voting methodology, as well as improvements on the submission side of ballots and the innovation management side of improving the ballots. So that's going to continue. By Q1 of 2021, I think we're going to have a very stable framework that's going to be able to do a lot. And we have some surprises there. Michael Lesser, to answer your question, that's August 3rd. And Darko will do some form of video on the ITN rewards to explain how to redeem them. Was Byron version 1 written in Haskell or Rust? It was written in Haskell. Haskell doesn't make your program great. So this is a common misconception. You can choose, like, think of a Lamborghini, okay? Just because you own a Lamborghini doesn't mean you're Jason Statham in the Transporter and you're an amazing driver and you can do just crazy stuff with it, okay? You're not Jeff Gordon. You can't be an expert racer. You have to have the requisite skills and knowledge to be able to use that tool to accomplish something with it. So if you put a professional racer into a Lamborghini, they're going to be able to do a lot more with that tool than they could do with a Ford Mustang, for example. Well, similarly, if you put a professional, brilliant programmer to a great framework like Haskell and use those tools, and they are very skilled with it, they can do amazing things with it. But if you put an amateur with it, it's just like having an amateur at a piano or in a Ferrari or Lamborghini. They're just going to screw everything up. So there was no Haskell Rust issue there. It was just the team of people who delivered the first generation of Byron didn't really have the skills that they needed to get it done. And that's one of the core reasons why we had so much pain throughout the years. But it made us better, and we fixed all those problems. And now we have those really awesome people showing up every day who are working on the Shelly code base. And that's reflected by the very smooth transition without incident. And there's nothing wrong with Mustang, by the way. Ford Mustang is a fine car. It's just not a Lamborghini. And that's why the Lamborghini is 5 times more expensive. Any takes on NixOS? It's very popular amongst our developers and our DevOps team in particular. Are you still taking Lion's Mane, and how did it work? Yes, I am, and it really helped me a lot. Wrote some code the other day because I had to for the stake pool, and wrote it in Python. Actually remembered a lot of stuff. We're actually doing a lot of data science work right now, and we're using the Jupyter Notebook and the Anaconda framework for it, and Pandas. And it's actually a lot of fun writing Python code. You can just rapidly prototype and do cool things. And you ask a question, you have an answer in like 20 minutes. I love Python. It's a phenomenal prototype and data science language. Are you planning to learn archery? Yeah, at some point I'm going to do that. How are the geese? They are named Strings and Wings. I named the goose Strings primarily because he likes eating things. He ate a big long string and I couldn't get it out of him, but I guess he's okay. And then he likes eating jewelry as well. He actually ate a pair of diamond earrings. Had somebody over and the goose was in her lap and the goose went on the air and took off the earring. I was like, wow, it's a very expensive goose. Good old Springs. .50 cal sniper rifles and farms go hand in hand. Yeah, don't mess with farmers. Don't do that. Pretty much every farmer I know is armed in some capacity, and a lot of them are veterans, and their kids are in the army or something like that. That's the backbone of America's food chain and defense chain. It's just a real stupid idea to break into a farmer's house. You can now incorporate artificial intelligence to your new game and have it write code with GPT-3 from OpenAI. I got to look more into GPT-3. It's a really cool thing, and a lot of people are saying it might be very useful for generative dialogue. So I'll talk to them about it. It's just I've been so out of the AI stuff. When I was a lot younger, I hand wrote a lot of artificial neural network things in C++. That was hell. I hated doing it, but it was a fun experiment. And then all these frameworks came out, and these kids today have Torch and all this other stuff to use. It's super user friendly, and it's like all the hard stuff is abstracted away, and you just get to the business of writing code. So it'd be really cool to see what the latest and greatest is. Did Twitter accept your proposal? No, they did not, unfortunately. Is it true that Cardano is limited to 1,000 pools only? No, it's a soft cap. Do you still use C++? No, I haven't written C++ code in over 10 years. It's been a very long time. I still write code in Python and JavaScript as well, because most of the times where I have to write code, it's when I'm curious about something and I just want to write a one-off script or program, or I want to automate something. I haven't written any like in-depth code in a long time. Do you use CSS and HTML? No, I do not. CSS and HTML is commonly used by the Daedalus team because they They do a lot of cool stuff there, and actually by our web team in particular, for presentation. You can build GUI with JavaScript and HTML5 and CSS3, kind of a web-oriented GUI. Like I believe we did that for the Voltaire voting app. And I think they use a framework called React Polymorph for Daedalus. AK or AR? AR-15 is a great gun, but I'm a big FN fan. A SCAR is a much better assault rifle. Will there be a detailed roadmap for Gogan like there was before Shelly? Yeah, we'll have something like that. Come on, give me something good, guys. Well, speaking of Hollywood, there was a book that recently came out called The Infinite Machine on the history of Ethereum. And I was in the book, and there were several chapters actually I'm in, including the eponymous Red Wedding chapter, which talks about my departure from Ethereum. And there's a very good chance that that book or one of the following books that come out will probably be optioned for a movie at some point. So I wouldn't be surprised in 2022 or 2023 to see like a social network style movie, Aaron Sorkin or whatever the hell his name is, style, come out on the history of cryptocurrencies and Ethereum, hopefully Cardano. And I guess the success of Cardano will decide whether I'm a major or minor character in that. But I'm certain that they'll screw everything up and get a lot of stuff wrong, and I'll be an interesting character. The Hollywood connection, though, from my side is that, I'm going to start a video game company. I'll probably call it Frontier Studios or something like that. And more likely than not, we'll set it up in Wyoming. If you create a really successful video game, then usually Netflix or somebody calls you, like, for example, The Witcher, and says, hey, let's do something about it. So we'll see what happens there. But the boundaries between Hollywood and film and show making and video games are becoming very porous because that's a great market. So it'll be a lot of fun to do something there. Legends of Valor is coming along pretty well. Still thinking about a few things. We got enough of the source to really understand what needs to be done, and I've been designing the game mechanics and and other things in my spare time, but I haven't had a lot of spare time, unfortunately. So, but we have a pretty good idea how we build the enhanced edition and the distribution model for it. So probably do what Beamdog did with Baldur's Gate. But I'll probably give the enhanced edition away for free and deploy it through GOG and other services, Steam, GOG, et cetera, as free to play, and get a lot of people there. And it'd be fun to pull some cool things in, like algorithmically generated music and generative dialogue trees. Thought a lot about alternative physics engines, like putting some non-Euclidean geometry and variable stuff like variable time and things inside the gameplay mechanics. And a lot of really cool puzzles that could be put in. But, this is just one of those things where you're like, it's like time is finite, life is hard, gardening season is here, just bought a tractor, got myself a Massey Ferguson, got to harvest the hay. When mobile wallet, Charles? There's already a mobile wallet. It's Uroi Mobile. It's pretty good. Yeah, actually, if you want to blow your mind, go to YouTube and check out Non-Euclidean Geometry Game Engine. There's some cool videos on that. Spherical geometry as well. There's some cool videos on that. How are Cardano and List different? Well, why don't you look into it? Still waiting for Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, the right studio is on it too. Divinity 2 was just great. Could ADA be used for in-game purchases in Legends of Valor? Absolutely. Be a great way of driving. In fact, it'd be cool to make ADA the only unit of account that you could use for in-game purchases and microtransactions. That'd be really fun. In terms of TypeScript, we are planning on doing a rewrite of Daedalus using TypeScript, but we're not planning on doing a full node in TypeScript. That'd be a real fun thing to do in 2020. ETC split it into 2 chains. Oh yeah, I heard there was a 51% attack or something like that. You know, what makes me really sad about ETC is that it could have been so much more. I joined ETC for philosophical reasons, and I said that I was around in the beginning. The ICO was done. There was this Code as Law group, and then there was this other group of people who were saying, like, build a world computer and move as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, took money from both. So somehow Ethereum had to service both philosophies. And then the DAO hack forced those philosophies to split to a point where they could no longer coexist in the same ecosystem. They actually had to have separate chains. Great. And I felt it was in the best interest of the Ethereum Foundation to support both philosophies and let the market decide. Instead, they chose to only support one and demean and diminish the other one. And I remember people from Consensus tweeting, just dumped all my ETC, so glad to see the price go down, hope it goes to 0, or something like that, paraphrasing, of course. So I said, well, you know what? I was around in the beginning, and if nobody wants to be a custodian and help out, I'll see what I can do. So I put my money where my mouth was, and I said, well, there's already clients that are running temporarily what they have, but we need a code base to diverge from that is not reliant on the Ethereum Foundation or Parity Tech or any of these other actors. So we put $1.5 million and we built Mantis. And it took 1.5 years to build Mantis and Scala. It's, to this date, one of the best products our company ever made. And if you actually want to watch real time us building it, you can go to the IOHK YouTube page and you can look at the old historical videos. And every week we had an update from Alan McSherry and the developers demoing what they accomplished that week for Mantis. And then we released the full client. And actually, when it was released, it worked with both Ethereum Classic and Ethereum. So I ended up building an Ethereum full node. Now, once we had done that, we really wanted to install a treasury system and do an aggressive roadmap and diverge much, much more so from where Ethereum was at. And we proposed that. And there were certain actors in the ETC space that just treated us like dirt for no reason at all. The ETC dev guys in particular were just vicious. And they said the treasury system was a hostile takeover, or just all this noise. And so I said, well, we're not making any money. We spent $1.5 million of my money building this full node. It's open source. We gave it to everybody. We demonstrated that we understand the technology as well or better than anybody else because we built the system from scratch. We didn't use anyone else's stuff. And we have a roadmap, and you guys don't want to do it. So how do we participate in this ecosystem? I mean, Cardano's technology is massively superior to Ethereum's technology, pound for pound. And we'll all see that in 2021 as we compete for dApps. So why would we then advocate people to build on Ethereum Classic in its current form with its current roadmap? Doesn't it make sense to diverge and go somewhere else unless we were paid to work on it? We asked for a grant, and they said you can't even get full funding. So we would maintain the infrastructure at a loss. And we look at dApp deployments on ETC, and they were declining. We looked at hash rate. It's stagnant or declining. We're like, there's no future here, guys, if you don't innovate. But I still tried to play nice. We went to the events, and we spent a lot of money and time sending people to various things and trying to build bridges and so forth. But it's just a great example of what happens when you have a static community that really doesn't want to change too much, and it's in love with a particular way of doing things. And they think that their way of doing things is so good that it's self-evident to everybody, and that because they're doing it, it's just going to be successful. And we're like, okay. But there's really no place for us in that. That said, we got the Mantis team. We learned a huge amount about Ethereum along the way by building an Ethereum node. We learned a lot about Solidity along the way. There's a huge amount of upside to that. And we kept that team working on something else. And one of these days we'll release that. And I think it's what could have been. But, bygones be bygones. Not everything works out the way that you hoped. And I made a lot of friends along the way. We met a lot of people along the way in the ETC community that are still friends, and they still work with us. And it was always the right decision. I don't regret it. They had a moral and fiduciary obligation on the Ethereum Foundation side to support both chains. And I felt that I had a moral obligation since I was there in the beginning to do something for that alternative chain. And it ended up working for everybody else. So everybody won in the end. Yeah, I'm getting that mic has a static noise. Yeah, you're not the only person to say that. I noticed it in my prior video. Maybe it's the noise cancellation that is with the thing. I'm not sure. Let's see our webcam stream. Oh, well. Yeah, I got some crackles from your mic, Charles. Yeah, exactly. It's the mic. Well, it's too late to switch it. We'll just have to have a crackly AMA. I'll switch it out later. No, I didn't have a chance to do a week-long fast. I will do one soon, though. I had to stop for a variety of reasons. All right, almost done with the live stream. Let's see if there's anything else here. Just finished Moonwalking with Einstein. Thanks for the recommendation. Super fun read. Crazy the things I can remember now. Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's a wonderful book. Josh Forer wrote the book, and it kind of changes your entire view on memory. I'm not the CEO of Ada. Never been, never will be. There is no CEO. What company do you think will create the vaccine first? It's Moderna's to win. To lose, I should say. They have a really good chance of surviving the phase 3 trial. There are 3 separate platforms, but the Moderna vaccine is probably the one that's going to be the first to market. That said, they use different mechanisms, so there's a potential that they could maybe be layered. It'd be an interesting thing to see if that's the case. But there's a real good chance that it's going to work and work by the winter to early spring. So the best case scenario is after it clears the stage 3 control trial, if it has greater than 50% efficacy, we could see that vaccine by November, December. Worst case by March of next year. but somewhere in that time frame, if it's proven to be effective. And there's good evidence of that, safety and efficacy. Now, many of you will say, but I'm not going to take the vaccine, or I don't think it's tested enough. That doesn't matter. Why a vaccine matters is it means the world can get back to work. The existence of one will get rid of these mask laws and allow us to stop quarantine and travel freely and so forth. And if not, well, you know what? I'm going to take a break from being CEO of Wild Global and take to the streets and start protesting myself. They keep moving the goalposts, and now we're at a point where it's for a vaccine. And once the vaccine comes out, if it's effective, there is no reason to maintain the state of affairs outside of total totalitarian control. So the government at that point has lost legitimacy and needs to be overthrown. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I don't know. Some people seem to think that this is a good idea to do perpetually, but we will never get better than a vaccine. And I don't care if the disease is dangerous. Polio was dangerous. Tuberculosis was dangerous. There's plenty of diseases that people spread to each other that are quite dangerous, or they get from nature that are dangerous. You still have to live life at some point. The goalposts have been moved to a vaccine. We got 3 of them coming out by the end of this year to early next year. And hundreds of millions of doses are being made and will be distributed. There is no reason for society to be shut down at that point. So hopefully we can all get back to work and forget about this, and we can move on, If we can't, well, then we have much bigger problems in society. And by the way, that's not me talking, Doc B. I just watched the Fauci testimony in the U.S. Congress, and I'm actually literally quoting Dr. Fauci on the availability of a vaccine. So he's cautiously optimistic. The companies that are making them are cautiously optimistic, and they've been doing this for a long time because they have a lot of experience with flu vaccines. And there's been a lot of advancements in vaccine technology that are now being brought into the market. In fact, the Moderna vaccine is a completely new way of doing vaccination that was previously only done with animals. And now it's the first time it's been done with humans. And again, doesn't matter if you want to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine, the existence of it is legitimacy to reopen society. So I'm excited to see it because I want society to reopen and for us to get back to the business of business. Yeah, and it doesn't take 10 years to develop a vaccine. You can speed up vaccine development tremendously if you do it right. There's enormous amounts of red tape and bureaucracy and other things that get in the way, especially when you're talking about things that you kind of already know how to do. And it shouldn't take 5 or 10 years to do that. We learned this with orphan drugs, and we learned this with rapid drug development. It used to take 10 years to bring a drug to the market with the FDA. And then suddenly, when we started lowering the red tape, we could bring drugs to market a lot faster. And it turned out that they were just as safe as the prior drugs. All right, kids. Good time as always. You've sold out. Shame on you. Fauci and Gates are pharma murderers. Pharma murderers. No, I'm a sellout. Oh, my Lord. And guys, stop worrying about Coinbase. Stop it. It's okay. Things happen in their time. We're doing everything we need to do, and everything is moving in the right direction. I wouldn't worry too much about any of this stuff. Just be patient. This is a product that's going to be around for decades to centuries. It's all about how we construct it. It's all about how we evolve it. It's all about how we roll it out. Sometimes you get frustrated and it takes a little longer to get something done, but it doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It's going to get done. And we are there. We're moving in the right direction. $32. All right, kids, time for me to get back to work. Thank you so much. Cheers.